Hey, Jones, get over here.
Yeah, boss?
You see those 2 logs over there?
Yeah, boss?
I want you to take those 2 logs and build me a pig farm.
Excuse me, boss?
Their problem?
How am I supposed to make a farm with that?
I don't care how you do it. Just do it.
Don't you think we're, missing some things?
Like what?
Pigs, maybe?
Pfft, that's ridiculous. Next you'll be telling me they ain't gonna make apples.
Apples?
Apples, tomatoes, who really cares anyway? What I care about is that you build that pig farm because next week we're gonna be tearing it down and building a pyramid with it.
Fine. Bet the Romans don't have to deal with this. The way I decided how to get to my top 10 is I took every game in my collection and I basically paired them off. And I said, which one would I be more excited about playing if you put it in front of me right now? And basically each pairing kind of went off, and then I moved to the next pairing, and I kept going until there was one game that I was most excited about, and second most excited about, and so on. I have no idea how Imperial Settlers got as high as it is. Because honestly, while it's a fantastic game, and I have nothing bad to say about it, it's not my usual style of gameplay. I would have, if you just said, all right, Mike, just name your top 10 without any kind of process, Imperial Settlers would have been high, but not this high. I'm usually into games with a lot of player interaction where it's like, I have my stuff and you have your stuff, and before this game is over, we will be overtaking each other and beating each other up and doing everything to mess with each other until somebody wins. This game, the way it works, there really isn't a whole lot of that kind of interaction. But before we get into that, I should probably explain how the game's played. In Imperial Settlers, you take control of one of the 4 factions: the Romans, the Barbarians, the Egyptians, or the Japanese. Each one of them has starting resources. Now, some of them are going to be slightly different. Some people have different resources than others. Some are able to store resources from turn to turn that others can't. But by and large, they're all going to be very similar. It's not like one of them is a clear distinctive. This game does a really good job of balancing the different factions. And you'll have general things that you can build, buildings that will help you get resources or do special functions, and then you will have faction-specific cards as well. This is how this works. At the beginning of the turn, you get a certain number of resources based on what faction you are. The resources are people, food, wood, stone, and gold. Wood and stone are the basic building blocks of everything. You need a certain amount of wood and stone, and it's on the upper left of the card. It'll basically tell you this is how much stuff you need in order to build this. Simple, right? It gets more complicated, though. You need to have built basic buildings in order to build up your faction buildings. And not only do you need to be building up those things to get more resources, in order to get those faction buildings, you have to destroy the building you already built. So once you've got enough resources to build a thing, you have to destroy the thing that's been giving you the resources you needed to build that thing. It becomes this really interesting balancing act of keeping things alive and building things up and absolutely destroying them. There's another token that comes in this game that I didn't mention in the resources, and they're raise tokens. And raise tokens are interesting because they they're swords, and they really are double-edged. You can turn them on yourselves to destroy your own buildings and gather resources from the wreckage. Or, if you get 2 of them, you can actually attack the other player. I think this might be the way that this game, which is mostly a very individual kind of structure, I think it's how it becomes as exciting as it is to me, because I do like the little puzzly aspect of figuring out when to build and when to not build, and when to raise things and when to build from the ashes. I love all this. And I think that aspect of every once in a while, especially with the Romans who are very, raise heavy, just having that threat of being at any point saying, hey, you like that thing you got over there? I took it, and I'm taking the resources. I'm destroying that. I'm taking your thing. Now, before you get worried that somebody's going to be able to just run over you, especially because of the fact that the Romans are combat heavy, once you build faction stuff, faction cards and faction buildings cannot be destroyed. They cannot be touched. They're there and established. So, it gives you a certain amount of safety. I'm still, even as I'm making this video, even as I'm contemplating what to tell you guys, I don't know how it got this high, but it does. It has grabbed hold of me. And I haven't gotten this to the table much just because it seems kind of intimidating to people, because there's a lot of, alright, so I get this and do this, and I have to get rid of these every turn. And then you start adding things like, oh, normally faction cards can't get attacked, but if I'm playing the Japanese, they can be, unless I have a samurai there, and he'll help. And it can be kind of crazy. But I'm going to tell you, it's the best kind of crazy. I'm not the kind of guy who usually enjoys this game. But I do. Immensely. I'm upset with how rarely I've gotten this to the table. I try constantly to get people to play this. There's a new faction out there. There is a 5th faction called the Atlanteans. I want them, but I haven't been able to justify buying it because of the fact that I haven't gotten this to the table. I'm going to fix that. I hope this video will maybe fix that, because I want this to be more of a thing in my life. I think there's just something really interesting in watching the empire build. But not just watching it build, but actually having that simple strategy to make it happen. And I like that, unlike some empire building games that take forever, a game of this, especially if you're only playing with 2 people, which most of the time when I've played it's only been one-on-one, it really doesn't last that long. It's a much more streamlined, much more get-to-it kind of thing. It only lasts a couple of turns. Now granted, those turns can last a while because each one basically goes until everybody stops. But there's a set limit. You know that in, 3 turns from now, it's game over. And I have what I have. I like that. Because I like being able to see that and have that empire building thing in what is really a reasonable package. So I will highly recommend Imperial Settlers. Even if you're like me and games that don't have that in-your-face mechanic don't normally sit well with you. I'm going to tell you that Imperial Settlers is still worth checking out. So when thinking about an honorable mention to go along with Imperial Settlers, I thought about some of the aspects about this game. It's a game about resource management, about making sure you have the stuff you need to build and get more stuff of what you need. It's a game where there is some player interaction, but not a lot. It's much more of a fluid kind of thing. It's not as hard and fast as I'm going to get up in your face. When I thought about these things, there was really only one way I could go, though technically it's 2 games. The older one is a title called Agricola, where you're building up a farm. But because we're living in the day and age that we are, Agricola actually had, I think I'll call it a sequel, and that's the one I want to use, mostly because there's some interesting added features to Caverna. Also because they're dwarves, and I have a particular fondness for all things dwarves. So we're going to go with Caverna instead. I've never actually played Caverna, but I have played Agricola, and from everything I've seen and every review I've read of what Caverna adds to it, I really think I'd like it. The big thing is that you are basically adding up your farm, and you're building that, and you're making that better, and you're trying to get more resources to take care of your family. You need those resources in order to live. At the same point, you're building up a cave, and in the cave you have different things like mines that give you rubies that are important for actually winning the game. You also have various kind of special feature rooms that give you that added extra stuff that really make things interesting. And all of this is done by building up actions in the center kind of shared panel. Now you're basically sending your people to that shared panel to say, I'm going to do this action this turn. Then the other players will also pick their different actions. And just like with Imperial Settlers, there is some player interaction here because of the fact that somebody might jump on the action you wanted to do before you have the chance to claim that. Also, just like Imperial Settlers, as great as it is with multiple players, I can only ever see me playing it with 2, just because this game is a lot more involved and takes a lot longer to get to the conclusion of it than Imperial Settlers does. So, there's part of me that is slow because it is a longer kind of drawn out thing, but I'm fascinated by even just watching people play Agricola and Caverna. I'm absolutely fascinated by the thought process of why you chose to do one thing over the other. And Caverna does kind of an added thing that Agricola doesn't do, in that you can really specialize, and you can be the Lord of the Sheep, for instance, and just have everything just overrun with sheep. And it's not that bad, because in Agricola you have to do a lot more balancing of different types of resources, but you can really go, well, whole hog in Caverna and be a kind of baron of a certain resource. And I really think that's interesting. All right, guys, we've reached the top 3 videos now. And the next one is going to be particularly interesting because I do have a fondness for card games. I do have a fondness for dueling games. And this one does not disappoint. I gotta say, I'm super excited to see what Plaid Hat's doing with this game, as they've announced a lot of organized play and a lot of kind of competitive aspects to this game. It's Ashes, Rise of the Phoenixborn. I hope you come back for it.